Great. Hi, Christine, Jessica, Bud, and Bob. Thanks so much for joining us today to talk about your campaign for governor. You're all seeking the Republican nomination in the May primary. And I think we'd like to start off by having you each tell us just a little bit about yourself and why you're running. And Christine, if you could go first, that'd be great.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you guys today. I am Christine Drazan, and I am a small town girl. I'm originally from Klamath Falls. And, you know, my family was impacted when the mill shut down in that community. And they talked all the time when I was growing up about politics. And they made this connection for me between folks that are elected to lead and those that, in fact, cause more harm. And that's where we are right now in Oregon. The people that have been elected to lead have instead hurt our state. And it's time for change. Oregonians know it and Oregonians feel it. I, rather than sitting on the sidelines, made the decision to run for office myself, to stand up and serve my community and be a part of turning Oregon around. I was elected House Republican leader 9 months after being sworn in. That put me on the front lines of the fight against single party control, to provide accountability and to push back against Kate Brown's extreme agenda for our state. I led the Republican walkout on cap and trade because that legislation would have harmed our state for the next generation. I'm running for governor because I want to make a difference. I want to help turn our state around and lead Oregon in a new direction. Thanks for having me here today.
Great, thank you. Jessica, can you go next?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to see all of you, even though it's not in person. Appreciate that. I'm Jessica Gomez. My background is I spent my early years in a low-income Hispanic neighborhood in New York. That's where my family is from. We moved to rural part of Oregon in 1989. It was, you know, the height of the spotted owl controversy, and my dad was a cabinet maker and wanted to have his own business, and we struggled for several years as a family and ultimately ended up falling apart. I left home. I spent just over a year couch surfing, living out of a car, a lot of time up dirt roads and in parks, as you can imagine, as a teenager. And I made my way back to New York and with my grandmother, got back into school, went on to graduate high school and college, and started in my industry, which is the semiconductor industry. And I started making minimum wage as a lab operator and worked my way up through the ranks there, and went on to start my own company at 26. My husband and I moved back to Medford and started a semiconductor manufacturing company here. I've been involved with politics for quite some time, made it through the Great Recession and started getting a lot more involved, knowing that we needed more economic development in our state. I currently serve on the Oregon Business Development Commission. I serve on the Oregon Health Policy Board. I'm the board chair for Oregon Tech, which is our only polytechnic university, as well as several others locally. And I decided to run for governor because Oregon really needs the leadership of a CEO and someone who's going to begin to return an investment back to Oregonians with tax dollars that we pay. We're paying a lot of money, and we are really not seeing the results that I think warrant that kind of investment. So that's why I'm here. I really want to see this change happen in Oregon. We have a great state. We have an incredible future. It's time to get going on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Bud, can you go next, please?
Sure. So I'm Bud Pierce, and I run simply to make Oregonians' lives better. I think that my life has trained me to get things done and to lead people forward. I have an interesting, as we all do, life story. I grew up as a janitor's kid. My dad died when I was 14. Next year, I'm bagging groceries for a living, and I've really learned the value of work, and that's, I believe, that all citizens and people need that purpose in life. I began school when I was 5. I finished my education and training when I was 38. I have 2 doctorates, all through the public education system. I know the value of great education. All children deserve it, especially those from the non-privileged classes. I'm a doctor. I started medical school 45 years ago. I have taken care of tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 or more patients. I still see up to 200 patients a week while I'm campaigning. I've learned so much about the dignity of people, the strength of people, the equality of people. My medical practice is so important to me. I trained, and I'm a Marine and a Navy Reserve physician, and you learn the military way of leadership. I think is very important. I've led the growth of our private practice from 6 employees to 250, from $1 million growth of revenue to $150 million, approaching that this year. And it has taught me how to lead people and be successful at a time when all private practices are shutting down. And I have also been very involved with philanthropy, giving away millions of dollars and raising millions of dollars for important causes. I'm very sensitive to the plight of people of color. My wife was late wife was a Chinese American woman. I learned so much from her family. And after the Ferguson, Missouri disaster and the racial hatred, I became very involved with the NAACP, and I'm on a U-League committee to raise scholarship money, and I've co-chaired, or I haven't co-chaired the Oregon League of Minority Voters. I think life has trained me in a unique way to lead Oregon as governor at this time to make our state all it can be.
Great. Thank you very much. And Bob, if you can round us out.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I grew up in the Bay Area, went to a Jesuit high school, went on from there to Oregon State University, had a great time at Oregon State, go Beavers. Went to Seattle University, got my JD, went on from there to Georgetown, got my master's in law. And then I wandered into business and started several businesses, and always maintained my law practice, but always had my fingers in business and started many companies. And that led me to running some large multi-million and billion-dollar companies. I am the one candidate that has a proven experience to fix Oregon's problems. Oregon has been lacking leadership. Oregon has been not solving its problems. And in business, you learn you must solve your problems. When I was president of Grocery Outlet, we had thousands of employees, and if we didn't solve our problems, we would have been out of business. I turned that company around. I went on to Raley's as president of one of their subsidiaries, executive assistant to their owner, and we turned that company around. Solving problems, and it takes experience. Solving problems is something that I do for a living. And in the Navy, 28 years, came out as a Navy commander. I went on 16 different missions. And as a commander, excuses were unacceptable. I always got the job done. In the Oregon legislature, my public service, I was chairman of several committees, including the Crime and Corrections Committee. We made Oregon safer. We passed we passed sex offender registration laws, we passed elder abuse laws, we passed stalking laws, we took the many misdemeanors and put some penalties to them, and we made Oregon safer. And when the legislature hit gridlock and they couldn't act, I took the Measure 11 out to the people, sponsored it, and we made Oregon safer, and we cracked down on violent crime. I produced results there too. So whether it's the business, my military background, my political background, I always got the job done. You have to know how to run large organizations. You have to know how to hire people. You have to know how to learn how to make decisions, how to set up action committees, how to march things through, setting up the strategies, the accountability measures. And as I always love to say in retail, retail is detail, and you have to inspect what you expect. Learning how to run and solve problems takes experience. That's what I have. That's what I look forward to. That's what motivates me to run for governor, because we haven't been solving our problems.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, I'm going to start off with Jessica, and I'm going to try to rotate in a fairly equitable fashion until I lose track. But Jessica, if you can start off with this question. Oregonians have not elected a Republican as governor in 40 years. What is it about you that will be able to draw enough Democrats and non-affiliateds, both of whom outnumber registered Republicans in Oregon, to win the governorship in November if you are nominated in the primary?
Yeah, thank you for that. My background is pretty unique. We haven't had a candidate like me. I've got that lived experience that is so important to Oregonians these days. as well as a business background. I mean, I represent a semiconductor industry that's responsible for, thousands and thousands of jobs in this state, and about $8.6 billion. And that's significant. And I think, we've got to have that business owner, that CEO's leadership. I think it represents something different to Oregonians than what we've seen, which is, people who work their way up through the ranks and become, that governor leader. And what we've seen is that it doesn't work. It's been a long time since we've had someone that can actually build an organization, understands how to hire people, what's important, how to empower their teams to do a great job, how to hold them accountable. And I think that's going to shine through during the general election. I'm also probably the only serious candidate in this race that is pro-choice. I think, although that we don't want to make that an issue, it is an issue considering what's going on, across the U.S. in the Supreme Court and what we've seen in Texas and Idaho. And I think that's going to play a role in this election, unfortunately.
Great, thank you very much. Bud, same question for you, but also with the added knowledge that you have run for governor before in the past and you lost to Kate Brown. So why do you think it would be different this time? How would you draw more Democrats and non-affiliateds to back your campaign?
Well, in my first run, I received 43% roughly of the vote, which means I had a lot of crossover appeal, and that was a run by a new candidate with very limited financial support, so no one thought there was a chance to win. Since then, I would say the Pierce brand has become stronger in the state. Again, my work with Oregon League of Minority Voters, our local NAACP, and my continuing charitable work has put me in a great position because I really do care about people, and people know that, and they're looking for that kind of candidate. We have Betsy Johnson. We're going to have two Democrats in the finals. Betsy Johnson voted with the Democrats 93% of the time. I think it's a golden opportunity for the Democratic vote to be split, as the Republican vote was split with George Bush Sr. and Ross Perot. And this is a golden time to win, and that's why you have 19 Republican candidates. So I've proven crossover appeal. That appeal has only been strengthened since I ran the last time. And we're going to have two Democrats and one Republican. So all of us on this call feel good about that.
Okay, thank you. Bob, I think you're next on this. Why are you the one to break the drought?
Because I think it's going to be irrelevant whether you're Republican, a Democrat, or independent. Voters are looking for somebody who can solve our state's problems. We haven't been solving the problem, especially in the Portland metro area with the homelessness, the crime, the petty crime, the crash and smash and goes, crash and goes, the catalytic converters getting cut off. People do not feel safe. And I think that between the homeless, the squalor, and watching their city of roses go downhill is they want somebody to fix it. And I am the person who can do that. My entire background in business is I've run, as I said, multi-million-dollar companies, and I got results. We solved the problems. I turned them around. There's a formula to do it. It can be done. These problems are very solvable. And I think it's the candidate who's going to convince the voters, all voters, independents, Republicans, Democrats, super liberal Democrats, I don't care, that we're going to take care of the homeless problem. We'll take care of the homeless too. And we'll clean up our streets, and we're going to make our streets safer. I did that in the legislature. I've done that in business, and I do that in the military. There were no excuses. And I think the voters are going to be very attracted to somebody who they believe is going to solve the problem. And that's why I think a Republican, I happen to be a Republican, but I do know how to solve the problem. I have the experience and the background to do it. And that's why I think this time, this year, things are going to be different.
Great, thank you. And Christine, how will you draw enough Democrats and non-affiliated to win in November?
And what's interesting right now across our state, and I'm sure you guys have seen it and heard it from your own readers, Oregonians are not satisfied with the results that they're getting from single party control. Democrats have had the governor's office all these years. They've had more than ample opportunity to solve the problems that we're facing And instead, Oregonians recognize we're going in the wrong direction. And they recognize that in a way that's like historic and overwhelming. All of the polling that's public polling indicates Oregonians are looking around and saying this is not good enough. And they're right. And so the opportunity to be in the general election is an opportunity to present them with a real alternative. I have led. I have the experience. I have the temperament. I have been in this process. I have been working on behalf of Oregonians to restore balance and to fight on behalf of people in a political environment that's unfriendly right now to the real concerns and needs of Oregonians, and instead has been agenda driven and has harmed people because of it. And so I believe in this year in particular that Oregonians are less likely to discount the candidacy of a Republican, and that they will be willing to consider a Republican that in fact is there to hear them and solve problems that they care about. And that's what I've been doing in the legislature. That's what I've been doing as House Republican leader. And that's what I want to do as our next governor. I am, elected as the last Republican in the House with my district wholly in Clackamas County. And I get elected well and above the margins every single cycle because I want to work with people. I care about people, and I'm there to serve Oregonians and make their lives better. So I know that that there has been, Dr. Pierce mentioned it. This is a unique cycle, but in addition to this, it's a unique time in our state, and people recognize the significant problems that we're facing, and they're looking for someone that is willing to step up and solve those problems. It's not about partisanship. It's about solving problems for Oregonians, and that's what they're asking for right now.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to jump in here with a question on housing, but I think that I've got you on the list as leading the first question this go around. I'm just curious what you think of this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I have. Yes.
Great. I'm curious what you think at the state level, what more could be done to address our housing crisis here? And also if you think there's anything to be done lobbying at the federal level to assist in that area.
Well, housing crisis. So I'll take the first one on, which is affordable housing crisis, which I believe is where I'll start with the answer. And you look around the country, there's a huge variation in the price of housing and construction. So it's not an act of nature, an act of God. It's an act of public policy. I think our land use planning, which served us well in 1970 to prevent sprawl and environmental degradation, has to be modified and modernized so that we can have more land to build affordable housing, i.e. lower cost of land. And also we can let in the intels who want to build large factories to provide great paying jobs. So I think we need to look at that. I think our fee structure for developers, I have patients who come in and talk to me about trying to build affordable housing in Salem. And the last person I talked to was $200,000 into the project. And they were still in the fees part and the approval process and the whole bureaucracy of trying to allow people to build items and build structures in a practical, efficient way needs to be taken on. I think some of the requirements for the way structures are built, including the insulation, the qualities, and other factors that make the cost of construction very high, have to be looked at and modified. So we have to be able to build it at a lower price. Our United Way spent 5 years and lots of meetings and some money to try to build 400 square foot houses in Salem that would let seniors and disabled people with pensions live there, and we've been stymied every step of the way. So I think the governor needs to go in that direction of solving the problem that we're doing in our own state, and that's really, in my mind, that's the affordable housing issue. On the the housing for the homeless, that has to do with, and the people that are not working, that has to do with all the struggles and demons that people face. Mental illness, alcohol and drug addiction, no matter which comes first, that's what people are struggling with on the street. And that's a process of moving to shelters with support and improvement in changing the trajectory of lives. And then again, eventually they're probably, hopefully, these shelters into productive lives and enter to some of those small homes that are affordable, and they can live there, and they can work and have a life. So it's building homes affordably at the cost, and then with the unsheltered, bringing them into the mainstream society. I'm not looking at the federal government as an initial reach.
All right, thank you. Christine, I think I have you next on the
Actually,
list.
I think Bob goes.
Is it Bob? Is that it? Okay, great. Bob, question to you.
Great question. I would ditto, not because I'm cheating, because I think Bud's right on the money. Contractors don't want to build affordable housing. They don't want the massive projects because it's not profitable, period. And it's not profitable because of the rules, the regulations, the time frame, the slowness of the process. They just, you wear them out. They just don't want to build them. And when you talk to the contractors who build these affordable housing complexes, they're done with it. And I think we need put it in Navy terms, I think we need some big course corrections here. You're not going to take the rudder and move it a little bit and expect to have a big change. You're going to have to take the rudder and put it to one side. And I mean by that is we need to have a top-down examination of why can't we build affordable housing in a year period of time, in 14 months period of time. Can't we fast track the process? What are the problems the contractors are having that dissuade them from wanting to build these, from the developers that want to develop them? Yes, we need to expand surgically the urban growth boundary, and we need a lot of complexes built. But I think we're only going to get that is by looking at why we've been failing it for so long. In order to solve a problem, you have to really first diagnose what the problem is. And that sometimes is the most difficult part of solving a problem, is making sure you get that right. And that's why I say we got to peel the onion back. And I'm not talking taking a long period of time, but three weeks, 4 weeks. I mean, that's what, if I was in private sector, I'd be given to figure out something to solve the problem. So I think at the heart of your question, that's the heart of the answer. I can go on with homeless if you want to, but that wasn't your question. And I can talk about other housing problems and the shortages and whatever, but I think I hit what you were asking about.
I think so. Thank you. Jessica, just let me know, do I need to repeat the question or is it clear?
No, I got it. Thank you. So yeah, land use certainly plays a role. We have the lowest available housing out of any of the 50 states. I was looking at some data the other day, and we just don't have enough inventory. Part of the problem, in addition to the land use situation, is that we've got our state agencies that are tasked with working with developers to get through this process, issue permits, are acting in a very obstructionist way. So, I know firsthand, talked to many developers, they've got property that they've been trying to build, desperately trying to build housing on, that's been locked up for more than 5 years. If we really want to solve this problem, we have to have state agencies that come to the table with a problem-solving perspective, saying to developers that want to build out residential housing, hey, how can we come and make sure that this project launches, and it launches within a time frame that's reasonable, right? 5 years is too long. We are desperate for housing. And so we kind of, in some ways, just need to get out of our own way and begin to execute. It's not, I think, our state agency's job to nitpick and to find ways to slow down a project. It's their job to make sure they facilitate that project in the best way possible, and to make sure that we are successful in building up housing, making sure that we have the right tools for our economy to do well. I'll tell you, in the last 20 years, we've had a 200% increase in the cost of housing. That is way, way too much. And you add in there, inflationary pressures that are happening now, increasing healthcare. Oregon isn't affordable anymore. You used to be able to, be a young couple and buy a house here, and you can't do that now. It's too expensive, and even just finding a home is too expensive. And that really extends to the rental market. We've had really a very, very hard time finding rentals for people who are home housing insecure. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And the solutions that the legislature has put in place has actually made this problem infinitely worse. They've gotten so over the top with this legislation that in some cases it's become a deterrent for people that want to actually own property as an investment and provide people with affordable places to live while they're hopefully raising their children and saving for a home. So I think it's important to understand the impact of that legislation. It's really important to understand the role that just the regulatory process that people have to go through plays in how quickly we can get off the ground with some of these really, really important development projects.
Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, this has been a good discussion, and you can tell you're on a panel with Republicans because we're all saying government's the problem. And government in this case absolutely is the problem. We have no lack of interest in the private sector to build homes, and we have no lack of interest in the market to buy homes. We have government in the middle in a way that has been self-defeating to our own goals. Whether or not it's inclusionary housing or middle housing or reach code or additional regulatory requirements, in all cases, when you add complexity and uncertainty, you drive costs and you impact outcomes. And that is what government has done. We have been in the middle of housing like it cannot function without us. And we have harmed our own goals. So if they talk all the time about needing 40,000 units a year, and they're building 15 to 20,000 units. We're not going to get there. We're not going to get there until we take a very, very serious look at what the barriers are, and we listen to the community that's out there trying to help us achieve this goal, and say we're going to work with you and partner with you to resolve some of these barriers. I mean, I was talking to a home builder who was saying that the new codes are elevating and increasing the prices of their homes for their costs to build that home by $20,000 per unit. That's somebody's well-intentioned push to say we need greener homes. And instead it's driving up home prices. Now, there's always public policy priorities that are in conflict with each other. There's always give and take. But we need to decide if we are serious about both building homes and making them affordable for everyday Oregonians to live in. The state recently has invested about $1.7 billion, state and federal government, on both housing and rent assistance and homeless supports. And that's just been in the period in the middle of COVID and up through this most recent session. There's no lack of money flowing into this problem, but people still do not have affordable homes to live in. We still have rents that are going through the roof. The state recently, there was a task force that was supposed to look at SDCs and the cost for SDCs. They were supposed to get those results back right away, expedite. We got to resolve this concern. And instead they pushed it back. It's not going to be available until we're leading into the next long session. That's not serious. We're not serious about resolving this challenge. We're serious about talking about it, but we're not serious about resolving it. It will take a change in leadership to tackle this problem, because the people that are in leadership right now are not making it a priority. They're just talking about it. And they're adding government intrusion into this market in a way that has not resulted in outcomes that they promised.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, I think you go first on this next question. There's no shortage of candidates who, on all levels of government, who are pointing to Portland as an example of what they will prevent if they're elected. And they point to homelessness, gun violence, and other problems. I'm wondering, what would you as governor do, and what should the governor do when a city like Portland is going through the problems it's having?
Well, so your question is, what's the governor's role in helping Portland fix their problem?
Right, and what would, yeah.
Well, okay. First, the governor has a box of tools. And in that box of tools is the power of appointment, the power over the government agencies, their executive authority, their emergency authority, their power and authority over the state police, over corrections, over the Department of Transportation. There's a lot the governor can do to help the city of Portland and the metro area. This is just not a Portland problem with the homeless, the crime, and the lawlessness. It may have started in Portland, and maybe the biggest events are in Portland, but the lawlessness is spread throughout Oregon. It is down here in Bend where I'm sitting today. It was in Medford, it's in Lakeview, it's in Coos Bay. I think we need to do is, taking my experience from the chairman of the Crime and Corrections Committee and my lifelong interest in law and order, and that is we have to support our criminal justice system. That means we need enough police officers to arrest people who are breaking the law. We need a prosecutor who's going to prosecute. Now, there's a special problem. That's a different question. Happy to talk about what a governor could do about a prosecutor who's not prosecuting. And then you need, the judge and the jury, and we need prison space. Thanks to the governor, we have lots of prison space because she's let out about 1,600 prisoners. What we need to do is to enforce the rule of law, make sure that Portland has enough police officers. They're down to like 760 out of a 1,400. That's a problem that's not going to go away soon. Can the governor help in that? I think so. The governor has the state police force. They have about 550 sworn officers, I believe. Can the state take on some responsibility for helping the Portland Police Patrol? Is there something the governor can do to help recruit police officers? I think there is. Is there something the governor can do to help persuade the prosecutor to prosecute serious crime in Portland? I think there is. I think we have enough laws on the books to take care of our problems, but we have to fix our system that is broken, and it's primarily broken because our police have not been treated very well, and the morale is so low that they are leaving, and we need to turn that around, and we need to recruit, and we need the governor's help. We need everybody's help. Statewide, we have about 5,500 sworn officers. I am sure there's some counties and there's some cities that just might be able to help loan some officers for a while to help Portland get through this crisis that they're in now, so they have time to beef up their numbers. That would be one of my starts. The second is, let's clean up the streets. The Department of Transportation, I mean, most of the garbage I'm looking at around, yes, a lot of it's some of it's on the streets, but a lot of it is just, it's along the sides of freeways. It's in our public areas. It's in our public parks. When you come across the bridge from Washington to Oregon, it's been this way for the last year. You got a sunken boat, you got a cars halfway down the bank, and you got all of this garbage everywhere. And then you look at the Welcome to Oregon sign. The governor has a lot of tools to help. It has to be a priority for this governor to solve and resolve the homeless problem, to get them off the street right now and into temporary facilities that are clean and sanitary. We're not helping the homeless by letting them live in squalor. We're actually having one big problem create two more big problems. And that's why it just boggles my mind why the city of Portland has been sitting here thinking that somehow allowing people to sit on and live on the street is creating problems.
And I guess, and I do want to keep it focused on kind of what the state or what the governor can do.
The last thing he would do, some of the root causes, some of the problems is the passage of Measure 110, legalizing drugs. I think we got to put that back on the ballot. I think we have to rescind that. I think that the drug use that is attracting people to Oregon and attracting the drug dealers and is causing a lot of the petty crime, which is growing into other crime, is also part of the problem. And the governor can lead that. I have led that when I got frustrated with the legislature not passing criminal laws to protect Oregonians. There is an initiative system. There's also a referral system. We can turn this Measure 110 around. And I think the voters deserve an opportunity after seeing how it actually has been implemented and how it's working, and the unexpected, unintended consequences of it is hurting us. And I think we need to put that back on the ballot as soon as we can.
Thank you. Christine, if you can go next, what is the governor's role, or should the governor's role be in addressing some of these problems that we're seeing in Portland and elsewhere?
Yeah, but the state has a direct interest in what happens on the streets of Portland. We have got to make Portland safe again. We need that community to be vibrant. We need it to be economically viable. And we need for it to continue, we need for it to return to being the economic engine that it has been in the past for the state. And so what the governor can do to support that, I believe that law enforcement support is critical. The fact that we have so much loss of morale in the law enforcement community, we need to support law enforcement. We need to hire more officers. We won't have safe streets without law enforcement on our streets. It is necessary. And I would do everything I can to support Portland in achieving that end goal. But along the way, if Portland does make the decision to decline to prosecute or to ignore Oregon laws, there's a lot of levers of government that can be applied against Portland. That's, you wouldn't actually think about it that way, but Portland has an interest in having support from the state, whether or not that's a budget that they're interested in, a public policy matter. We are interconnected governments. And Portland takes for granted that the state will back its play. I will not. Their decision to make Portlanders less safe will face opposition at every corner from my administration.
So can you provide an example, for instance, of how? Okay.
Yeah, Portland is one of the most kind of actively engaged entities that comes before the state legislature. Whether or not they're asking for special carve-outs for themselves, whether or not they're asking for special land use accommodation, whether or not they're asking for special funding, all of those issues come before the governor's desk. And if they will not work with me, I will not work with them. Let's be very, very serious about this. They have got to get serious about protecting their own community and stepping up and recognizing that our interests as a state are tied to Portland's success. It is important that they also take responsibility for cleaning up their streets. They can't have it both ways. They can't have the political benefit of having handouts from the state legislature and then go back and squander those funds in their community and not actually improve quality of life for Portlanders. So, I absolutely believe there's a law enforcement approach to this. I believe that homelessness has a lot to do with it. Of course, Measure 110 is a failed policy already, but there's a political element to this where Portland has been allowed to run amok because, unfortunately, Governor Brown deferred to Ted Wheeler and others in the Portland community rather than taking a stand and saying this is not good enough for Oregonians and you will enforce the law.
Great, thank you. Jessica, same question for you about what actions you would take or should the governor take?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is really just a result of weak and poor leadership across the board. And a symptom of this sort of single party rule, right? There's nothing to push up against, meaning, you've got Mayor Wheeler, City Council that are being influenced heavily by some very loud activist voices. And they are paralyzed by that. They don't know what to do. They can't stand up for themselves, even if they know what the right thing is to do. They are petrified by the thought of just that onslaught of pushback. And so as governor, it really becomes your responsibility to take charge, provide that political cover that they need in order to do the right thing, right? So, fine, you want to, you don't want to do the right thing, Ted Wheeler, it's okay. You blame the governor. I will take responsibility, but at the end of the day, you've got to get Portland back on track in our urban areas, safe and cleaned up. We can't be successful without a successful Portland. I mean, that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. That's the door to our state. That's what people think of when they think of making an investment in Oregon. And we need to prepare downtown Portland and some of those areas that are really struggling for reinvestment so that businesses can move back in and we can have a thriving economy there. And we're not going to be able to do that without strong leadership from the governor's office. And yes, there are plenty of levers to pull behind the scenes. Of course, you need to be very careful about that. I'm not going to be in the business of sacrificing the needs of Portland residents to execute a political agenda. But there are some really systemic issues that we have to deal with. Getting the unsheltered homeless into long-term rehabilitation programs is going to be really important. We are almost dead last in addiction and recovery services and mental health services. That is a statewide infrastructure problem. And without that, you're not going to have your urban areas be successful. And it's happening all across the West Coast. So as governor, I put in place, a staged sort of model to deal with this. Number one, we got to clean up all the blight and garbage that's on our streets. Number two, designate an area for our unsheltered homelessness people to be, where they can move all the services to that area, so that's on site. It's a highly managed environment. And then we have to really work hard to build out an infrastructure. And the model that I put in place, is modeled after elderly care. It's community-based, it's got 3 levels of care. And we need to start our unsheltered homelessness, people that are struggling with addiction and severe mental health, in the most secure level of care, so we can get them stabilized and start, recovering those lives and getting them healthy again, and then reintegrating them into the community. Without that, we're really going to continue to struggle.
Great, thank you. And Bud, what about you? What's your thoughts in terms of what the governor should do?
Thank you. My experience in medical leadership is collaborative leadership, working with peers, more equals, not dictating to people that because of a position of authority. And I think that's how these issues will be best solved. Our practice has grown and been successful really under my leadership, but it's been a soft form of leadership where I engage my partners and we talk about issues and we come to compromise and collaboration, and then we move forward and get the job done. It's been very successful. Mayor Wheeler was voted to the office by citizens of Portland. Commissioner Sharon Myron, who may be the head of the county commissioners, my friend, is being voted by citizens of Portland. And Metro President Lynn Peterson, another colleague and friend of mine, is the head of Metro, because they're all voted into office and all have responsibilities. And I would take the same approach I took in medical leadership. When I speak to these individuals, no one wants criminality in the street and people hurt and property damaged and destroyed. No one wants homeless people living on the streets and the myriad of other problems that metro areas face and the recovery from the COVID pandemic. So again, it's collaborative. We together recognize the goals and we work together to achieve those goals. I think assistance, both moral, financial, is the key to the recovery of Portland and the urban areas that have recovered much more slowly from the pandemic than has the rural areas. But again, it's a collaborative a form of leadership that is firm in setting goals and working again very collaboratively to making sure those goals occur. The governor should not have a dictatorial relationship with the citizens of Portland or its leadership, because those are the leaders that were voted on by the citizens. So it has to be very collaborative, problem solving, get the job done, spread the praise around, and just get it done for the citizens of Oregon and the citizens of Portland.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are first with you, Christine. Several of you have mentioned already your opinions about Measure 110, but I'm curious what you would do specifically to speed up the distribution of funds to the service providers who will be providing the mental health and addiction services that I think I heard all of you say we really need right now. So specifically, what would you do to speed that up?
Yeah, well, as you know, budgets express priorities. And after Oregonians voted in Measure 110, the ability to actually fully implement that and get that system up online and in place and funded has not met expectations. The conversations that I've had with folks in the recovery community in particular, I don't believe that Measure 110 as structured is going to be workable. I don't even think that as it's fully funded, that it's the right solution. So to be clear, I think that it does need to be repealed. In the meantime, we have got to get funding out and into the communities and into our nonprofits and the supports and the services and the providers out there that are depending on that to be able to provide these support these individuals. But we have problems with reimbursement rates. We have problems with access. We have problems across the system. And so I do think that, simply the funding side of this is important and critical and has not been met yet. But I don't see 110 as the solution. I really, really, really don't. And so the fact that the money was diverted and was not directed as it was expected from Oregonians will be corrected in my upcoming budget. But I can tell you that I will still work to repeal Measure 110.
Okay, thank you. And Jessica?
I agree. 110 was, I think, the structure and the decriminalizing drugs really gives us less tools to try to solve these really systemic issues. But as far as getting out the money, the money is sitting in the Oregon Health Authority. They've been unable to execute on a lot of things. And this is just one other kind of failure to really execute. And we see this across the board with other state agencies. This is nothing new. And it's really in impeding our ability to deliver services. So the very first thing, it's not a quick fix, is you have to have the right leadership at those state agencies, and you have to build out and streamline that capacity to actually deliver services. They've got a 300 question process in order to evaluate the grant applications. It's too slow, it's too bureaucratic, and we're not actually getting the job done. I think overall, we need to really fully integrate our mental health and behavioral health system into our health system. And right now, it's the funding is dealt with separately. It's dealt with as a separate system, and it really, I don't think it works at all. You should be able to go to your primary care physician, get a referral if you're struggling with mental health. Or addiction, and not have to go through this very separate system. It's expensive, it's harder to coordinate, and we've got a lot of work to do in order to really get this system into shape for actual service delivery, because we've got at-risk communities that are really struggling with this. There's this big focus on health equity, and the problem is we can't even execute on delivering services to sort of the communities that we have and that are actually even able to access service. So again, we got to streamline the system. We got to get rid of some of the bureaucracy and start getting those dollars down into our communities so we can really deliver those services. And these systems have to be well thought out. They have to be well integrated. And that's going to take leadership at both the local and the higher levels.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bud?
Sure, I think the governor needs to declare a substance use disorder emergency, get things moving. I think a lot of times these emergency acts are really there to get government to move. It's not about getting citizens to do anything. It's not to get government to move. And the substance use disorder community desperately wants a point of contact and much more coordination to more effectively deliver services, and the monies obviously have to be gotten out to the service providers and probably enhanced funding where the case can be made that the funding is woefully inadequate. My, Measure 110, as you're going to hear from Republicans, we're very interested in repealing or just rewriting it or remaking it. And my greatest contention is that the illicit drugs are still illegal, which means that the people who are bringing them to the citizens of Oregon, which is, again, a terrible thing and so self-destructive when people use these drugs, the people that are bringing these drugs are drug cartels, and they're involved in human trafficking, human slavery, and gang warfare. And when people buy these drugs, and the idea was that we wouldn't add to their misery by incarcerating them, we try to help them. But when they buy these drugs, that purchase is supporting drug cartels and gangs, and it's also supporting criminal activity by poor drug users who don't have any means to buy them. So it's so poorly thought out in so many ways that we're all going to want it repealed or rewritten. But what I can do as governor is get that substance use disorder emergency state in place, get a single point of coordination or a few people within the governor's office, and make sure the promised funds are delivered immediately.
Thank you, Bud. Bob?
For all the reasons that Bud stated, it has to be recalled, and it has to go back into an initiative, out to the people. They're the voted in, they voted out. To answer your question, how do you get the dollars out of the program and into the people who need it? I spent 7 years on Oregon Council on alcohol and drug abuse. I know an awful lot about drug abuse, rehabilitation, trying to help people. And we had a hotline. We spent a lot of time trying to get people rehab. And the problem is, I think Measure 110 is built on a false premise. And that is, people are going to put themselves into rehab. That's not going to happen. Maybe 1 in 20, when they hit absolute bottom and their whole life has fallen out and circumstances, they might put themselves in rehab. Otherwise, it doesn't work that way. Our criminal justice system, helping people get into rehab, giving them alternatives to jail, is the solution for getting people cleaned up. But what 110 is actually doing, it's actually causing more harm than good, because it's encouraging more drug use. It's having people from out of state who would be criminalized, using the methamphetamines, the cocaine, the shooting up, the smoking. They can come to Portland and they can live on the streets, and they can do it with impunity. They don't have to worry about it. So we're actually attracting the exact thing that we're trying to solve. And then you got all the dealers and the things that Bud was talking about that's following it. And then you got the crime and what follows that. Everything I've read about this agency or this group that was put together to try and get some money into rehab hands to help the people who are suffering from drug abuse. I think it's just got to be taken apart. I think, as I said before, that you have to diagnose the problem before you can move forward with a solution. And I think what was set up is flawed. So if you just wanted to carve out the side of this, if you were to repeal the legalization side and go forward with the rehab side, I think the rehab side needs to be rethought. It needs to be shrunk down. It needs to be turned into a 12, 13 person action committee. You need to have accountability. One of the things this group does not have is how many, when you give money to an agency or to a group or to a home or to a rehab facility, how many people have you put in treatment with the dollars? How many have finished the program? How many have stayed clean? What's your success rate? How many have left the program? Have the dollars follow some accountability, because if you're just going to hand out money based on some process that a huge group of people came up with, it's just not going to work. So I think the thing should be taken apart and rebuilt on the rehab side. And we also have to have, if nothing else, Measure 110 just on the legalization side cut out. We don't have enough money in the state for drug rehab. We don't have money in there for mental health. Our state is doing the worst job on both those matters. And so I'd like to keep the money, but I'd like to direct it to a more purposeful way that has accountability to it, that's actually going to get people in the treatment, that's actually going to help solve the problem. And then maybe take some of that extra money, because the way I do my math, we have more money here than we need. Let's put some of that money into the mental health services for the people who've already fried their brains. You know, they need help. And so that's a long answer to it seemed like a simple question, but it's really a very complicated question. And it's built on a false premise that the actual system we have is a good one and it should be implemented. I think it should be taken apart and rebuilt.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, Jessica, a question for you first. Even before the pandemic, Oregon's education system has registered some of the lowest graduation rates in the country, high chronic absenteeism, large achievement gaps between minority groups and white students, and higher income students versus low income. What is holding Oregon's education system back? And are there a couple specific ideas you can offer for what you would want to achieve in your term as governor?
Yeah, like many of our state systems, we're really lacking the ability to execute. So in most of these cases, we have the dollars. So it's not about the money, it's about how we use it and being strategic about making sure that we are delivering those services. And right now we're not serving kids. We have got to get more money down into the classroom. We spent a lot on administration. In fact, I saw some numbers as high as $300,000 per classroom. And we know that $300,000 isn't making it to the individual classrooms when we still have teachers that are buying materials. So we've got to work harder to really determine how we get those dollars directly into the classroom. Kids need more support, more one-on-one time. And we also have to work with parents to make sure that they understand what is needed to help their kids to be successful. Because, you know, we can have the greatest education system in the world, but if parents aren't brought along and also aren't able to support their kids, we've got some really big challenges. I'm in favor of, you know, allowing for a lot more mobility between our public school system and in charter schools. So, you know, choice between those different schools and allowing schools to specialize in certain sort of areas of education, I think would be really healthy. In many cases, we have a lot of school districts that are clustered in smaller areas. And I think it would be really healthy to have some competition between those districts. I think it is, as you kind of go up into the grades, we've got to refocus our attention on reading, writing, math, engineering skills, those critical thinking skills, and transition to a more hands-on approach. So in high school, I want to put a statewide apprenticeship model in place. Starting in the 11th grade, kids would select a career choice or career pathway. Their classes would be aligned to that career path. They would start working in the field. They would get a mentor at work. That work would count towards credit at high school at graduation, and then would continue in through the 11th and 12th grade. And the hope is that our kids are now going to graduate with work experience, that they're going to graduate with a career pathway and the ability to be competitive in higher education, if they choose to go that direction. They're doing this in Colorado. They've got programs in Wisconsin and North Carolina that are extremely effective. They have some of the best workforce system in the whole United States, and we can do this. We are well set up for it. I think we've got to have some structural things that are adjusted in order to accommodate for it, but this is going to be a need. We've got to start graduating kids that can be globally competitive in our workforce. Again, we're big in semiconductor industry. We're big in manufacturing. We make things and grow things in the state, and we need to focus on developing that workforce. And that really starts with our kids and giving them the right tools to be successful in the future economy that we're building.
Great, thank you very much. Bud, if you can go next, what would you say is holding Oregon's education system back, and what specific ideas would you seek to implement in a term as governor?
So we need to copy success. This was a prominent issue in 2015, 2016. I was studying about the state of Massachusetts, which, despite their high prowess in higher education, had one of the worst performing K-12 systems well into the 90s. New governor came along, identified a working group of educators who desperately wanted to make education better in Massachusetts. And what they really did was they created, as has been discussed, some variety or options for education within the public education system. They had academies, learning academies, they had subject-focused schools, they had career technical. And again, the students and their parents would help choose the appropriate education place for the student. They brought in parental organizations that got really involved with the school in a major way, and how the school ran and had oversight in that school. So it was real parental involvement and a huge focus on teachers. Let me say I was in education for 33 years by the time I had finished. And what was always, the environment I always got the best education was when I had an environment conducive to learning, and I had a great teacher in the classroom. and that teacher was well versed in the subject and had great leadership skills. And Massachusetts recognized that much more teacher preparation and training for leadership in the classroom and support of teachers with authority and accountability. And what they did was, as the system improved from a poorly functioning system as we have to a good functioning system, more money went into the system. It wasn't money first, improved second, it was side by side. So I think we don't need to recreate the wheel. You need to find states that have done it well before us, and we're going to copy that model and make Oregon top 10.
Great, thank you. Bob, what about you? What are your thoughts on what's going wrong with education and how to fix it?
Boy, another hour? Schools have to be schools of excellence. And what I mean by that, yeah, okay, we're at the bottom. We've been at the bottom for a while. Again, we're not going to get off the bottom by just tweaking something. We need to really look at what is the problem, how do we get there, and how do we get off the bottom? And I think the target's got to be school excellence. What are the elements of that? I was lucky. I went through some good schools. I went through some private schools. I wasn't that smart. The schools made me smart. The teachers made me smart. I had to take Algebra 2. That means after I flunked Algebra 1, I had to go back again and take it again, Algebra 2. They didn't push me out. They made me take it until I passed the course, till I got it. I'm not the math guy with algebra. I think schools, there's some lessons there that schools have to cater to the kids, to their problems, to the nuances. I don't have all the answers on the elements of what's going to make our schools great again. I know that some of the elements are kids and parents need to be focused on more. We need to have more choices in charter schools, private schools, home schools, trade schools. I think that the dollars should follow the kid. I think competition with public schools is helpful. I think the Catholic schools in Oregon do a very good job. Why do they do so well? Now, I know there's some obvious answers, but there's some unobvious answers too. I had one of my daughters went to Jesuit. My other daughter went to Lake Ridge at the same time. There's a lot of differences there I think we can work on to get our schools better. I don't have all the answers on this. Again, I would attack it by defining the problem, getting the right people around the table, and what can we do, noticing that tweaking is not going to fix the problem. So focus on excellent, focus on choices, and let's get the problem defined, let's get the solution dialed in, and let's go after it.
Great, thank you. And Christine, what are your thoughts on education?
Yeah, so your question was what's holding education back? I think, you know what, we're talking the basics here. We literally have a problem with entrenched special interests. We have a problem with bureaucracy. We have a problem with politics. And frankly, we aren't engaging parents and kids in a way that is productive right now. I don't think education, as much as we have amazing educators across the state, I don't think that education policy always centers on the student. Right now, we have education policy that I have kids in school right now, right? We've talked about this before during COVID and what that looked like for my middle schooler at the time, who's now a freshman in high school. And I can tell you that the classroom experience is dramatically different between the ages of my oldest and my youngest. They're 6 years apart. And the classroom now has so much focus on issue areas that are not reading, writing, and math, and are social and emotional learning. And while I respect the need to support our students no matter where they're at the end of the day, our schools need to be about outcomes, and they need to be about educational outcomes. Our schools need to return to the basics of their core mission. And that is not popular with people that view schools as an opportunity to build and grow change makers. I want my kids to go through school to be able to find their best future for themselves and be prepared for a future where they can achieve their own dreams. Our schools are leaving students behind. When you look at what achievement looks like for students of color, for homeless students, and on down the list, they are absolutely being left behind by our current system. And removing testing, reducing graduation requirements, none of that is helping any of those students. All it's doing is masking the real problem, which is that we need to better understand what students need from an academic perspective and craft and deliver interventions to meet that need, to actually be wholly focused on outcomes for our kids, outcomes that are academically focused. We need to welcome engagement with parents, and we need to remove any barriers that families may have to open enrollment, charter schools, and other options which will best meet the needs of their students, including school choice. When we have an education system that's underperforming at the level that this one is, we need wholesale change. And we've also talked about this issue that funding, from my perspective, is part of the challenge. When we went from local funding to state funding, that obviously benefited the burdens that people felt in their property taxes. But the responsibility didn't necessarily follow that. We don't have the level of accountability at the state level that we need. The state is not rising to the challenge. If we're paying for all of this in our schools, we need to have an expectation that what we are supporting in our classrooms is outcomes for students where they can read, they can do math, they are prepared for whatever their next step in their life may be. And we need to recognize that not all students need to go to college, and there needs to be a pathway for every single one of them. And that has to be an important part of workforce and workforce training moving forward. We should not shy away from that. But at its core, what's holding our schools back right now is that we have lost focus on the student, and we have lost our focus on what the goals of our education system have to be. It is not to shape the next generation for the interests of people with a political agenda. It is to help students be prepared to choose their own best future and to allow them to arrive at their own values themselves, and not with the shaping and assistance of an education system which may or may not be in conflict with families and family values. I do think that level of conflict between the classroom and families right now is problematic in a very real way. And the best way to restore a partnership there is to get politics out of the classroom.
I want to follow this up a little bit, and unfortunately we only have about 5 minutes left, and I also want to hit greenhouse gas emissions. But Christine, so what is the role of, you're talking about getting politics out of the classroom. Mm-hmm. And I think as a general statement, many people would agree with that, but they don't necessarily see racial history or, Oregon's history in terms of racism or sexuality or gender identity as necessarily being political. So I guess how does that fit into the classroom?
Yeah, so what we have right now is that in particular, ODE curriculum standards, when it comes to what is required for our teachers in the classroom, we've added layers that if you read the language itself, the language that's been added is absolutely political in nature. So if your kindergartner is having a discussion in their kindergarten class about their identity and their gender and visible and invisible differences between them and their fellow classmates and what they can do to achieve justice, that's political. It just is. And so what you were addressing were issues that were in fact academic. Oregon was an exclusionary state. We have, in fact, at our founding, historic elements which need to be known by the current generation of students. That is a very different mission and requirement for our schools than helping students understand from the time that they enter the classroom as kindergartners, shaping how they look at themselves and shaping whether or not they fully understand their identity within a context of equity. And so I really believe strongly that adding those layers, and we talked about housing and complexity and regulation and all those kinds of things, that sometimes that's counterproductive to your goal. That's what's happening right now from my perspective in education, is that somebody out there might look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm well-intentioned. I know what I'm trying to achieve here. And I'm telling you, it's counterproductive and it's not benefiting students. It's creating conflict with parents, and it's the wrong focus. And especially at those younger ages, 3rd grade and below, a lot of the content that's been added that in fact is in our classroom structurally right now is not beneficial to the student's progression through school and achieving this mission, this goal of helping that student be prepared for their life beyond that. And we can change that. We can change that at the Department of Education. We can change that at the Oregon School Board level. And from my perspective, we must. I'm not suggesting that we shy away from very hard truths. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I am suggesting that there are, in fact, elements to what's being suggested, that's what's in the classroom right now, that goes well and above and beyond that. And I find it appropriate, and a lot of fellow parents that I interact with all the time have concerns about it in a way that's moving people out of the public school system. I mean, we've seen the numbers. Thousands and thousands of students post-COVID did not go back to their public school. And that is that's going to lower funding for our classrooms. That's going to hurt public education. And if the goal is to strengthen public education and support student outcomes, the stuff that they're doing right now is sending parents in the opposite direction. And I believe that's appropriate. They have a right and a responsibility to set the values for their own families and not to hand that over and co-parent with schools. So I think that these are issues which are really, really important right now, but I do think it's counterproductive to outcomes in the classroom.
Thank you. Somehow I want to squeeze this in. If you guys can just give a very brief response to this, and Bud, I believe you go first on this. But I was just wondering if greenhouse gas emissions reduction is going to be part of your agenda as governor at all.
The National Academy of Sciences, our preeminent scientific advisory group, says that humans are impacting climate change, and a part of that impact is through greenhouse emissions, and we should take practical steps to lower those emissions. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Any examples? Any specifics?
Well, again, what you know, the reliable on the energy side, the reliable sources of energy are hydroelectric and carbon, and you need to have reliable sources of energy that are low cost. I'm very interested in the green energy movement, but I'm also interested in reevaluating nuclear that's been proven to be safe around the world. And again, we should do the practical steps of weatherizing our homes and our businesses and appropriate planning. But again, we have to be very careful about not raising the prices of energy and such to make life unaffordable for Oregonians. Great. And we have to realize again that we're only a tiny part of world emissions. Most of it's China and India now. And what we really need to do is develop the intellectual capability to have low cost replacements for carbon production going forward. And so our intellectual might is probably more important than what we could do at a practical level today.
Thank you. And Bob, how about you? Are there any specific ideas you have for reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, I would say yes on the greenhouse gases, but look out for the unintended consequences. Make sure you're launching off and you've looked at those unintended consequences. I think electric cars, having tax saving energy credits and programs for winterization and saving energy is a easy step in the right direction. And there's a lot of it's a big area that we can attack, and I think we all would agree upon.
Great, thank you. Christine.
Yeah, we have an opportunity in Oregon with our working lands and our forests and the industries that exist here to be a carbon sequestration engine. And we need to acknowledge that. I do think that there's a role that is underutilized right now when it comes to recognizing the value add that Oregon can provide. In addition to that, it's really, really important that when we look at greenhouse gas emissions reductions, that we view it as an opportunity to actually achieve actual outcomes. In the past, it has been primarily utilized as a leverage point to increase taxes and increase costs for businesses and families. And that has been the primary end result of the stuff that's been proposed in the past. I would oppose anything that drives up costs for families with no benefit. I will absolutely stand and protect hydropower. It's critical, and work to do everything we can to support small scale nuclear. We have opportunities right now.
Great, thank you. And Jessica.
Yeah, I think that Oregon's global impact of our emissions is very small. It's like 1/1000th of a degree if you look at the impact of carbon on our atmosphere. So, when you're looking at a global problem, you have to take a global approach. And so that doesn't excuse us, but it does help to point where our resources should be spent. And I think we're not leveraging our public university system and our innovation economy to really produce the new technology that we're going to be needing. So we've got a lot of tools that are in development. I think we need to support that. We can use small scale nuclear reactors. There's a lot of technology on battery saving, and we can export that technology to the rest of the world and have an impact. The other piece of that is that we have to work on resilience for our state. So if we're going to be warmer, drier, we need to work on water infrastructure. We need to make sure that we take very good care of our forests. We let 1 million acres in the Northwest burn. That's a huge amount of carbon that has been released into the atmosphere. And then we don't do our work in recovering those forests. We don't harvest or salvage the timber that's there. It's allowed to sit and rot. And so there's some policy adjustments that need to be made both at the state and the federal level. But if done right, Oregon can really have an impact and be part of the solution as opposed to really just raising prices for Oregonians.
Great. Thank you so much. You guys were great about watching time. I do have one more question, but what I'll do is I'll follow up by email. I want to be respectful of your busy schedules. And if I have any other, and if you can respond by email, that would be great. But thank you so much. We're aiming to come out with our recommendations a week from this coming Sunday.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.